Okay, sorry guys, just bear with me for a moment. I'm just trying this live stream for the first time. And I was trying to connect my camera, iPhone camera, to my MacBook, but it was not working. And I couldn't seem to start it on my phone, so I had to start a new live stream. Hi Winnie. Hi Santhu. Is my screen, should I turn my screen like this? Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay, if you can hear me, say, can you message you can hear me? I can hear you or something. Okay, great. So I'll just show you my desk right now. This session is going to be in a demo style, so I'm going to do some drills and then write some words and sentences, and then I'm just going to explain what I'm doing as I do it. So over here, I've got my desk mat. This just gives it a bit of padding. I've got 2 pens that I prepared. One has the G-nib that I used through my course. And then this one has it's called the Leonard E. Principal nib. It's more fine and flexible, which I might show you later. And then I'm using Sumi ink. And I prepared some white ink. If we have time, I can demonstrate that. And then I've got a water dripper bottle and paper towel. And then just a pencil if I need it. And then I've got some tea because it's 9 o'clock in Australia. So I'm just drinking some chamomile tea before bed. And then just some pens. And then I've got these guidelines, which are the word guidelines, which I'll demonstrate the sentences. So usually when I start with the G-nib, after I haven't used it for a while, I like to use some hand sanitizer, just clean it, because sometimes this nib can get a bit oily and the ink doesn't stick. So if that happens, even if it's a used nib, you clean it again. So I'm just filling ink. This is how I normally fill ink, with a dripper bottle. And I'm just going to do this, one of my favorite drills, just to quickly warm up my hands. And because I'm right-handed, I have my paper, this is my desk normally. I've turned it about almost 90 degrees so that my hand has a lot of room and it feels very natural. If you are left-handed, you want to turn it the other way so that it's in the direction of your left hand. So I'm going to turn that back. So just starting with these spirals. I won't do the whole page, I'm just going to do maybe 2. So this is one way you can do it. Another way, if you want to control the pressure, is every time you get to the top, you lift your nib, and then every time you get to the bottom, you lift it. This helps you control your pressure. And then I like to move my hand over a bit after a few strokes, because you are mostly using your fingers to move the nib. You're not really using your wrist. Okay, great. Everyone can hear now. And if you have any questions, you can leave them a bit later in the session so that it doesn't get missed. But if you do have any question throughout, you can ask. It's just that I'm not looking at my phone all the time, so I might miss it. Feel free to ask. Ruby Ritual, I don't know who that is. So this is the anti-clockwise, and then I'm going to do the clockwise. Do you guys want it any closer? Is this like big enough? I might move it a bit closer. So, how often do you perform? Don't know what that is. So this is the clockwise drills. So this one is slightly harder. Okay, I have a feeling I think I've turned my live stream public, so there might be some random people joining. So this is the warm-ups I would recommend doing. You can do 1 line, 3 lines if you feel like your hand's a bit shaky. And then we can move on to the writing of sentences. And for sentences, I'm going to go through the capital letters as well as connections and everything together. So I've chosen a quote, something positive, because I've been trying to focus on that recently. So I chose "Let your dreams be bigger than your fears" for the first one. And the first attempt, it will just be in plain copper plate, and then the second attempt, I'm going to try and add some flourishing and explain how I do that. So we're going to start with the capital letter L. Move my camera. So L starts with, just want to check, is the camera clear? Because when I look at it, it seems to be out of focus when I put my hand down. Maybe I need to move it closer. It goes out of focus, doesn't it? I think because it needs to be in the middle. Okay, that's better. So we'll start with L. So sometimes when the ink dries a little bit, you can do this on the top of your paper to get it started, and then you just dip it a little bit and it starts the ink. So L has this entrance stroke, and then usually when I get to the top, you can lift your nib and then do the capital stem. Lift it again if you want. And here, because that's transitioning into an E, I stop it halfway between these 2 lines, and then I transition into the letter E. And now I'm going to do the square top. So very subtle turning of the nib, and then the crossbar in 2 separate strokes. Now I like to leave about 1.5 space on this guideline, and then start the next letter. So this is Y, about half a space, and then into an O. So because it's an O and U connection, it's pretty straightforward. Just the exit stroke. Go slightly above the header line, and then we do R. So another 1.5-ish spacing, and then we go D. Can it be zoomed a bit more? I can move the phone closer. Is that better? How's this? Not a problem at all. Okay. Let your dreams be I will move down here. Oops, that was meant to be bigger, and I wrote B again. So we'll ignore this one. Ignore that, and we'll write bigger. So we have a double G here, which is a really good opportunity for flourishing later. And this happens when it's out of ink. So I'm just refilling the ink. And I just want to also give you an idea of the angle I'm holding it. So I'm going to try and turn the phone. It's about 45 degrees. Sometimes when you see my videos on Instagram, it looks like I'm holding it really high, but that's more just because of the camera angle. It can be a bit deceiving. So here I'm just touching up the square top. And out of ink. I think the ink's just a little bit dry, so sometimes when the ink dries, Kasumi ink, not super water soluble, I get a little bit of water on the paper towel and then just give it a clean, just mainly clean the tip. So then it looks like this. and then that way you can refill the ink on the tip. And you want to make sure if you're using a dripper bottle or a brush that you do fill both the top and the bottom side, because if there's only ink on the bottom, sometimes it doesn't flow. But if you're dipping, then you don't need to worry about that. What am I writing here? I was writing F. Okay. Wrote a B by accident. Not used to talking and writing at the same time. Okay, so if we ignore the mistakes I've made with the L and the extra B, this is what we have. I'll just move it up a little bit. So one thing I noticed in a lot of your homework is in letters like L or S, where this capital stem tends to be connected to that first stroke, you want to make sure to have a very clear curve here and then another curve here. It's quite common for people to turn it into like a really straight line, like this. So this will be a bit too straight. You want it to be more curved. And then spacings between letters. So for most of these letters, it's pretty much just one of the letter spacing. And then when you have letters like T, you want to have a bit more than one space. If you want to write this text on one line, do you write so much smaller? Is that possible? Yes, you would write it smaller. So for things like custom commissions and stuff that I do, where I'm writing letters or things like that, I don't really use a 5mm height. 5mm height is really like, you're really practicing each letter very clearly. If you're writing longer sentences, I would recommend around 3 to 4mm height. And you can also make the shades smaller. So let me demonstrate that for you. So I'm just going to demonstrate it here, even though this says it's for flourished. So assuming we're still using 5mm. So an example is currently you have very prominent shades like that. But you can make those shades more delicate. And that missed the line. So very delicate shades. And when you do that, you can make the letters smaller. So for example, if I want to write like this height, you can do much smaller letters and it'll still look nice. Whereas if you use shades like this first one, it's not gonna really work. That's just gonna be overwhelming. Like if I try to use, that's just does not look very pleasant. So as you reduce the size of your letters, the height, you want to be more delicate with the shades. And that kind of just takes practice. So for example, for this H, in a big H, I would start the shades I can start it quite early if I want to. But if I'm doing a smaller H, you would do something like this. And then you shrink the letter down because you can't really shrink this one down because it's so thick. Okay, hopefully that answered your question. So next I'm going to do a flourished version of this sentence. And this gets a bit more fun. So when I do flourishing, I tend to cut off some areas when I'm writing. So it'll make more sense when I write it. So for example, things like descenders, ascenders are places where I can add flourishes. So for example, you can do things like this. You can do, big flourishes. So instead of finishing the letter, I actually want to kind of stop here so that I can extend it later on. And let's have a look at areas we can flourish. So we want to look at spaces that are kind of empty. I guess that's what people call negative space. So for this word, we have nothing up here. For dreams, we've got something here, but nothing here, nothing down here. Bigger, we have some stuff down the bottom, but nothing here. And then we've got some space here. We have a H and a T, which can be joined together like this. Use a different pencil. Can be joined, and then we can extend it. Because we have space, we can even extend it if we want to. Same with Y here. There's a lot of space, so I can do something like this. F is always a fun one. So this bottom part, we can extend it into more like a descender stroke. And then the top, if you really want to, you also can. The double G, the important part is I like to choose just one of the G's to flourish. So usually that means the first one, which can cross over into the second one. If you want to flourish the second one instead of the first one, you can do a small G here and then a big one that loops it. So, and then Some other letters you can flourish is the letter R, which you can extend downward if you want to. And it's always nice to finish the end of a sentence with something like that. So it's not just a exit stroke. And if we do that, then we're not going to do anything with the F. We'll keep the F as it is. And the letter L looks pretty nice here, to be honest. I think it doesn't have to be flourished because it kind of matches the end. For T's, obviously you want to change this straight line into something a bit more graceful. And since we have a large area of space here, we probably want to do something here. So the ones where we can extend downward here are either the S or the R. If we extend the S, do something like that. Alternatively, we can extend the R. I would probably choose the S just so it's more balanced because we have something down here. If we put something down here, it's just a bit more balanced. And a key part about flourishing is you don't want the flourishing to overwhelm your letters. So that means try and keeping them as hairlines as much as possible. Even if it's a downstroke, try to keep it as a thin hairline. So I'm going to write this sentence again. And maybe I will try to fit it in one line and see if we can do that. So my ink has been sitting there for a while, so it's dry. It's probably not going to start. What I do is I get my dripper bottle, drip a little bit on there, and then just give it a wipe. And hopefully this time I don't write the wrong letters. So since I'm going to try and fit everything in one line, I'm going to do some really thin shades. So thin shades also means you can start the shade later and end it earlier. So I'm going to leave the T here and just move straight to the next letter. I'm trying to make the spacing a bit tighter so it can fit in one line. And the Y, I'm just going to finish it here so that I can decide what I want to do with it later. And you can either have an entrance stroke or just go straight into the O. I think it will be a little bit of a challenge to get it into one line with this height, but we'll see. D is another one you can flourish. So instead of doing the square top, you start it with a thin line so that it can be extended into something else if we want to. And I'm actually sitting in a really awkward position because my phone is right in front of my face. Just a interesting fact. And the B, we're gonna just do it halfway as well. I'm gonna leave room for flourishing. Another B, so we're gonna do that again. And I haven't decided what I'm gonna do with the G yet, so I'm just going to end it here for now. So that we can flourish it later. And remember the TH, save some room for flourishing. Okay, it's definitely not gonna fit, so I'm just gonna move the last two letters down the bottom so it looks a bit better. And it's just not one word on the last line. Then your dreams. All right, then your fear. Yeah. So the F, instead of starting here, I'm going to give it some room just in case it wants to flourish, both ends. Okay, so we've done the main parts of all the letters now. Now we're going to decide what to do. So I think the T is pretty obvious. I'm just going to do a gentle crossbar. And the Y here, I reckon we can do something that goes up to about this point, and then the S can cover this area. So while you can make your flourish really complex, sometimes it's really nice to just keep it consistent. While you can do lots of loops and everything, it looks best when it's consistent. So I'm gonna have to fix that part. Just gonna fix this part. And a key part is you want these cross intersections to be kind of perpendicular. And then the letter D, can do something like this. And I think time is flying. Can't believe it's almost 10:30. Sorry about the technical issues at the start, which wasted a bit of time. Next time, I think I'll know what to do. S, I'm going to bring it down from this dot. Then add a little shade. And then B, since we don't have a lot of room here, I'm gonna keep it a simple one, not as complicated as that. And this B, I actually want to cover more of this space here. So do something like this. Because if we do the same thing here, it's going to be really squishy. Now the T, H. See how I'm using minimal shades? And then if I knew this was going to be the last letter of the line, I would probably do something more like this to finish it off. Oh yeah, and the two G's, completely missed that one. Because we have flourishing here, I think you probably don't want to do too much. So the first G, I'm gonna just keep it as it is. And then the second G is where you can my ink is dry. Extend it out. And then the Y, this is where we can do something a bit bigger. And I would say the F, I would try and cover some of the space here. And we're going to do this F slightly different. And then finally the S. Again, another one of these very popular flourishing. So then, when are you using the little dot at the end of the flourishing? What does that mean? Can you explain? So here's the full sentence. When you say dot, are you talking about the dots here, like these? Because for these dots, I like to add a little dot just so it looks complete. Otherwise, sometimes it looks like it's just half finished. So, yeah, those ones, yeah, okay. And, yeah. So I think this is all the time we have to cover, but I'm glad we covered a sentence. If you have any questions, just message in the last 2 minutes. And I did forget a dot here. How do you decide on how and when to connect subsequent letters? Thanks, Christy. Like the O is not, oh, okay. So, usually, honestly, it's just personal preference. For me, if I know I'm going to be flourishing the Y, I generally skip the connection. But if it helps and it's easier for you for consistency, then you can do like an entrance stroke. But if you know that you're going to be doing flourishing, you can always just skip it. Sometimes doing the entrance stroke helps with the spacing, but honestly, it's personal preference. Yeah, and because it's such a thin hairline, it doesn't change the visual side that much. Thanks, Winnie. Hope that answers your question. So when it comes to flourishing, most of the time is leaving room for possibilities, I guess. So, always not finishing your descenders and ascenders and then coming back to it after. If you want to do it quickly, you don't want to come back after, a good way is to do small flourishes like these ones. They don't take up a lot of space, so it won't interfere with other letters. But if you want to do really big ones like this, you got to make sure there's no other descenders next. Otherwise, it's going to get really crowded. So thinking ahead. And that's it. It's my first live stream. You're always drawing before you do the flourishing. No, I usually don't. So if I'm writing like lines and lines of words, like a letter, I don't. But if I'm doing a heading or if I'm doing like a card, happy birthday or something, then I would draft it more. So I would use the pencil to kind of draft out the idea so it doesn't mess up. But if I'm just writing sentences, then I tend to just stick to the small flourishes. But like the more complex, if I'm doing a single word, then I would definitely draft it out because it helps with the balance. And hopefully that helps, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the session. Thanks all for coming. Yeah, and it's almost bedtime for me here. So hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend if it's still during the day. Right, bye.